Well, I'm delighted to be here and to reflect with you about the shack. Since it's a book I didn't write, I'm not going to entirely do lecturing about it, but I'm going to have you help me with this. Because in many ways, a book like The Shack invites us to a little interaction. This is theology, and theology is just a simple way of saying how people talk about holy things. You know, theologians oftentimes think they have some sort of trademark on theology. That really theology is only for erudite people. That's a fancy word for people who have a lot of degrees. But everyone's a theologian. That's why, in a way, I asked the question to begin with, what struck you about the book? And each one of you actually answered in a theological way, didn't you? Each one of you had opened up the Trinity. It talked about a vision of God being different than what I thought. Those already are things that we ask ourselves, don't we? And almost any time people are struggling, they ask questions that are theological. They're questions about the meaning of events. What's going on with me? How did I get in this mess? How do I get out of it? And while certainly we can get in and out of this mess perhaps by our own behaviors, and get out of the mess perhaps by medication, surgery, or taking a long vacation, those answers are oftentimes deeper than that. I mean, quite oftentimes, fiction does a better job of portraying theology than the professional theologians do. It certainly touches a lot more people. So I'm a big fan of books like The Shack. I'm a big fan even of Stephen Peretti's book. I'm a big fan of Madeline Engel and C.S. Lewis and people like that, because sometimes it's the indirect way that gets us to ask the question of value. And one of the reasons that The Shack is of value to me, besides the fact I think it's a good read, is that it's valuable to people like you. People's theology is important. People's theology. I'm all for taking theology out of the seminaries and putting it on the road. Whether it be theology on tap or theology on stage or theology on bookstore. It works well. Well, when you think of The Shack, and I'm going to have you help me tonight, because that's the best way for us to do it, because probably you notice things I didn't notice. The fact that somebody's talking, whether it be your pastor, a professor, or somebody to talk about a book tonight, I don't want that to get in the way of what you've learned, because you may have discovered something that I didn't. But I want you to think about this, and my job as a convener here tonight is to weave this all together. A good teacher, in my opinion, is a little bit like a weaver. You hear a lot of things, and you try to weave them together and make some sense of them so that you see a big picture of it. When you think of The Shack, what do you think the biggest message of The Shack is? If you were to decide, and there are no wrong answers here, believe it or not. As the postmodern world would tell us, perspective is important. Perspective is key here. What do you think the messages are of The Shack that really struck you? That'll give me my marching orders as to where to go. I don't want to take you on, I'll take you places maybe you didn't think you needed to go or were planned to go, but I'd like to hear where you thought the story would take you. Yes?
Well, I think there can be so many themes, but for me there are two, and one is just the overarching theme of love.
The overarching theme of love.
Yeah, that's the first one, and then the second one, and you were talking about the Trinity as characters and Mac's interaction with them, and for me it's that interaction, like the possibility that we may not be able to be kind of like Mac was physically with the three members of the Trinity, or the three persons of the Trinity, but can we deepen our relationship with those three persons to really be in a relationship with them always on a constant daily basis?
Okay.
And that was really challenging.
Love and the three persons of the Trinity, which are portrayed pretty graphically in this book. you know, some people critiquing the book, and we'll talk about that later, have found that problematic. But just this past weekend, I was lecturing at the Methodist Seminary in Washington, D.C., Wesley Seminary, and virtually everyone who finds themselves in the Christian family, and I'm not saying that to the exclusion of other religious families, by the way, but this book is a Christian kind of book, so I want to talk about that. Virtually everyone in the Christian family has a person of the Trinity that's kind of their favorite. You know, the Pentecostal folk, really, the Holy Spirit, right? Liberals tend to like God the parent, the creator of it all. Evangelical folks tend to like more the Jesus-y things, as Anne Lamott would say. Just as some people find that different parts of the Christian year speak more to them. Some people in this room are more Christmas people. You know, it's the incarnation. It's God with us. For others, it's Good Friday, the sense that God suffers on our behalf. For some, it's Easter. You know, the triumph, or the fact that the butterfly comes forth out of the cocoon. There's new life in the face of death. Love and the Trinity. What other thing? I mean, many of us, when we think of God, you know, God obviously in a cosmos of 40 billion galaxies, I mean, there's a lot of room for us to get lost, isn't there? But the intimacy in a 40 billion galaxies with a billion planets in each one, give or take a million between friends, you know, there's a lot of room to feel lost. But maybe also we're loved intimately too. What other things were for you the message of the book?
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Yeah. Almost all of us have to deal with that. Almost every one of us at the end of the day feels we've been slighted by someone, either large or small. And probably at some time or another, almost everyone here in this room has had to acknowledge that we didn't do the best we could have in certain circumstances. You know, the great if-onlys of life. You know, if only I'd been a better parent, if only I'd really done more in this marriage, if only I had done this, that, or the other. We live in that, don't we? Forgiveness. And forgiveness is not cheap here. As Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the theologian, might note, died in a German concentration camp. Good grace, forgiveness is never cheap grace. Good grace always costs somebody something. It always costs the one who forgives something. Maybe pain, maybe scars, as the Shack would say. Yeah. Any other things?